Are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
All right,
Yeah.
let's do it. Let me get my seat situated. Scooch. Do a little scooching. All right. You're so good at this. You're
I do not feel good at this.
You're incredibly charismatic. Okay. Hi, welcome back to Pass the Torch, Legacies and Jewelry. My name is Naja Desa Van Diest, and I am not in Colorado today. I am in Taos, New Mexico, visiting the wonderful Peter Gilroy and Bonny Doon Tools. Thank you so much for having me out here.
Yeah, thanks for making the trip down here.
It's so fun. So give people who are just listening and not watching the video just a look around the room that we are sitting in right now.
Yeah, so we are sitting in the middle of our machine shop. So there's a massive 5,000-pound lathe right behind you there. That's, one of our most utilized tools. We've got a bandsaw over there and manual mill, grinders, and big heavy-duty like industrial CNC mills for, and this is where we're making all of the tools that we sell.
Yeah.
Literally almost every single component gets made right here.
So Bonny Doon Tools, tell me what you guys are all about. What do you guys even sell? For someone who's never heard of you before, what's the elevator pitch?
Yeah, the elevator pitch, our mission statement is to help you as jewelers make beautiful things. We do that specifically through making hydraulic presses and tools and custom tooling to, help artists, achieve whatever crazy dreams they have in moving metal. And essentially a hydraulic press is just a really big hammer, but it gives you really good control. So it's not just having a much bigger hammer, but it also gives you this level of control that just a hammer can't achieve.
Right.
So, Bonny Doon Tools, and we started in 1991 officially in Bonny Doon, California. So that's where we get our name from. A little town north of Santa Cruz called Bonny Doon, and it was Bonny Doon Engineering. And the engineer was Lee Marshall, who started the company. Debuted the first presses at a snag conference in San Francisco. And then it grew from there, like Lee working with my uncle Phil Poirier, working with artists like Cynthia Ide. There's a whole bunch of other ones that, over the years, like to help develop the tooling. And then eventually Lee decided to retire. And so Phil had already been working with him for years. And he convinced Phil to buy the company.
Right.
And so Phil and a friend drove out to Santa Cruz and brought back a trailer load of like industrial machinery and set up, a machine shop here, and started, making all of the tooling and kind of redesigning it, redeveloping it, made the presses a little bit stronger, a little bit better. And then, tooling. The tooling's all come from like a need, right? So we're working at the bench and it's like, oh, it'd be really nice to have this. And it's like, okay, well, let's go in the machine shop and start tinkering around and like figuring out what to do. So that's sort of where all the tooling has developed over the years.
So tell me a little bit about your background and then how you ended up with Bonny Doon Tools.
Yeah.
Because you were a jeweler first.
I've been an artist, jeweler. I mean, I grew up around my uncle's studio before he bought Bonny Doon, and so I grew up working in his shop. Ultimately, I went to college and I did a little bit of metal work, but I actually ended up focusing on photography. That was kind of what lit me up at that time. And then I started getting into doing woodworking. So while I was doing that, I started working with metal again. I started making like custom hardware for furniture and stuff like that. And my uncle needed some part-time help. So I came in to Bonny Doon, and it was like 2009, 2010, right around there. And I started running machinery, making bracelet formers, kind of just doing grunt work. Honestly, I would say it was within days of like getting back into his shop and starting to play with stuff. Things really lit up for me. And I started making weird things. I was actually making bracelets out of street signs.
Cool.
Like the weird reflective street signs. I don't know, I like found them around and I started cutting them up and forming them into bracelets. And that was kind of cool. They were like flashy and the light was really cool how it played off of it. But that sort of led me right away. I was able to got a gallery that was like, sure, we'll, take your stuff on consignment, and had a big show there the first year. So that was kind of, my re-entry back into the jewelry realm.
Right.
And then I kept from there, really started to learn CAD, started to learn CNC machining here and develop all of those skills while making my own lines of jewelry. And a lot of my stuff at first was like titanium, very weird minimalist, not necessarily weird, but kind of minimalist colorful, abstract jewelry.
Right.
And using the technology, and that's what was kind of cool is the funny story is right when I started making jewelry, gold had been about $800 an ounce.
Yeah.
And this wasn't that long ago, and then in like that year, it jumped to 1,400 an ounce. Yeah. And so for me in that time frame, I was like, I could barely afford silver, would love to work with gold. And I was just like, there's no way, like, that's insane. That's so expensive. Like we wish now I would have bought a lot of gold at 1,400 an ounce. But because I had the presses and stuff, and working with like this big heavy duty machinery, I started using bandsaws to hack up titanium and to make titanium bracelets and stuff like that. So the press gave me this amazing entry into like being able to work with different materials, and soon started playing with Damascus stainless steel, which is super fun. Such a cool material.
Well, what I really love about Bonny Doon and why I was attracted to you guys and your tooling to begin with is because you actually do service a lot of different types of jewelers. So like in my camp, I lean more towards fabrication and lapidary and stuff like that, but there are so many different things that you guys offer. Can you talk to me a little bit about all the different services that you guys can cater to?
Yeah, the press is kind of interesting because we do have some tooling that's like, you use this tool, you press a button, you make this one thing. But most of our tooling is kind of an accessory technique to whatever you do. So being like a hand engraver and stone setter, like, well, all of a sudden the press opens up your ability to like form these complex textural pieces or like highly detailed engraved pieces, and to form them quickly, beautifully, and not mar the metal at all.
Right.
When we're looking at the general scope of the tooling, it's kind of interesting because it can do so much. And like whatever you're doing, press can probably help you do it. It can help you do things you can't do other ways. We've worked with a lot of artists who have really interesting techniques. So we worked with a company that did filigree work.
Yeah.
And forming filigree, like hoop earrings and stuff, is really difficult because it's so fragile and delicate. And so we set them up with some really soft urethane and the formers, and they were actually able to like very easily start forming these anti-clastic filigree hoop earrings. And in terms of like who we work with, all the services we do, everybody from sort of that hobby jeweler that's aspiring to be pro or semi-pro as a jeweler, right? Like there's people that really are questing to make awesome stuff. We work with a lot of studio jewelers and small retailers that are doing their own work, their own designs. So probably a lot of companies that are like, well, not companies, people, artists that are like 1 to maybe 3 employees.
Yeah.
And it really helps because you can do small production runs on the press, but you don't have to do 10,000 pieces. So like we've worked with lots of shops that are doing like good production. We had one shop that I think they had 2 electric presses set up side by side, and they just cranked out cuff bracelets all day, roller printed 18 gauge like copper and brass cuff bracelets, and they just had 2 full-time people forming cuffs. And it was like, that was kind of crazy. And they're making thousands and thousands of these every month.
Wow. But then I've worked in a repair shop that had a Bonny Doon press.
For one-off type of work, it's great. We have a lot of artists doing one-of-a-kind pieces, and you might spend days doing the fabrication and overlay and engraving on a big bracelet blank.
Right.
And then you go over and use the Bonny Doon press to form that into like beautiful, seamless final bracelet, right? And it might only use that press for 10, 15 minutes of this like elaborate process, but it forms the bracelet in a way that you can't do by hand. I've seen bracelets that 20 layers of overlay, all like really complex, and there's just no way you can bend that.
Or people even using steel.
Yeah, steel. 1/8-inch thick Damascus steel.
Right.
And like when I teach classes, it's like, okay, we can like, I'm going to teach in copper because it's cheap material, but like that exact same technique, almost everything identical, you can now start doing 1/8-inch thick steel, stainless steel, for example.
Yeah.
So that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tough to kind of conceptualize at first, I think, because you don't feel how much power the press is giving you. So
Well, I think for someone like me who I say this often is smaller in stature and strength
Yeah.
and has minimal upper body strength, a huge part of the conversation when I was having conversations with other jewelers, I was vision casting what my career would look like. I did get a lot of people being like, hey, you might not do this career well because you don't have a ton of strength. You don't have a ton of upper body strength. And what I have been able to pivot towards is leaning on the custom tooling, the pneumatic engraving elements instead of
Hmm.
just doing hand push and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then this press has like been a huge thing because forming is so difficult for me to some capacity. Obviously I can sit there and go to town with the hammer, but then
Hmm.
like you said, there is that element where the press allows it to be seamless.
Yeah. Like, yeah, smooth, nice forms. And I think my view of it, a lot of the techniques is it takes some of the grunt work out
Hmm.
so that I can put more value into the finished piece. So
Hmm.
like I can now afford to spend 6 hours hand engraving something because I'm not spending 4 hours raising the vessel or something, for example, like, and yeah, I mean, even being like bigger and like stronger, like I
You're a
still,
very tall
yeah.
individual. He's like 6'4".
I still like, yeah, I mean, it's only like so much
Yeah.
physical work you can do every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, the focus for me on like the artistry of it, yeah, I think the press is cool like that. We also do custom tooling,
Yeah.
and that's not for everybody. It's not cheap. The amount of like time and energy and engineering that goes into like custom engineered applications for the press is extensive. And that's where we do work with a lot of like bigger shops or production parts who, and they might be making 100, 200 pieces a year, but if we can save them 4 or 5 hours per piece or more,
Right.
like all of a sudden that $2,000-3,000 die set is kind of comical, like
Yeah.
what the ROI can be on that. And I mean, my goal is always to be able to make stuff better. Like, I think a lot of people are like think cheap and fast. It's sort of like the way so much stuff is made in this world. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna make it out of thin, crappy metal in China. But it's like, well, we can actually use the press, which press is like really old school technology.
Right.
It's not. I mean, they've been around since the 1700s for doing coins and other stuff, and um, so it does produce a really high quality product. I mean, we haven't like talked about that
Yeah, well, we
much,
we
but like,
definitely talked a little bit about that, how you go the extra step to harden the steel
yeah,
of your tools.
yeah. I mean, like the making of the tools has a fair amount of engineering and just experience and testing and
Right.
breaking. I mean, that's what like for some of my early days, I was doing a lot of these texture dies that I would hand forge, and I was heat treating them in the kiln, and it's like I was following the recipes for heat treating, but wasn't necessarily like testing them as well. And and then I was like throw these dies into a 100-ton press, and I like broke quite a few. Or I would like be like, oh yeah, these like the engineering says I shouldn't be doing this, and then I'm like, oh, it's fine, I'm gonna do this, and then it's like, oh, okay, broke another die. But like, so I learned through a lot of that and
Yeah.
learned all these. I mean, with every technique, all these little tips and tricks that make a big difference
Right.
in the final product.
I want to talk about you touched on it a little bit, but I want to dive into it, like who it is that is your client base, because I do think it is quite broad. But then again, it's also like relatively specific as to like a professional level. Like
Mm-hmm.
you really service the professionals of the industry, both in small shops and shops at large, but you do kind of like cap out. Could you mind just talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think. I mean, if we're talking like the top end of the spectrum in terms of production, like if you're
Right.
making more than 5,000 pieces a year of one specific design, there's whole other presses and die sets that are designed, progressive dies, and like there's four stamp machines, there's cam presses, there's all these different things, and it's like Tiffany and Company. A lot of the big companies are using die struck because it does create such a high quality product and very fast. But those, now we're talking like their presses might cost $100,000, and each individual die set for one single piece or one single component, we're talking $20,000 to $30,000 for a single die set.
Yeah.
But they set up and they run 10,000 pieces almost hands off on some of those things. So
Yeah. So
we don't do that. Like, and we're kind of more focused on the art side
artist
of it,
jeweler,
the artist jeweler.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of it is like I still hand carve and engrave dies. And like I do the math on it, and it's like I might spend 8 to 10 hours making a die. I'm like, well, how many pieces do I need to make it worthwhile?
Right.
And like usually I'll do 10 or 20 pairs of earrings of a set design, and like, depending on silver or gold, it's like all of a sudden my time that I put into making that die, I might only make 20 pairs of earrings, and it was totally worth it.
Right.
So
right.
Whereas like just making one little flower earring all by hand in silver might have taken me 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
Making the die takes 6 or 8 hours. So.
Well, for me, what's so beneficial about the hydraulic press is the forming element of it, because that's really where I'm going to be applying, like for me personally. Can you talk to me a little bit about your starter kit for people who are just curious about hydraulic presses, who don't own one, who would like to utilize this tool in their studios?
Yeah, forming is such a powerful tool. There's so many different aspects that can go, like we can get into so many different like tools and forms and stuff like that.
I'm learning so much. I've been here today and I'm just learning a ton.
We developed this new press system that's going to be coming out this year, and the idea is you get the press, you get all the parts and pieces you need. And I wanted to expose people to a lot of different techniques. And because right now the toolkits that we have are like big, and they have a lot of tools, and they're fairly expensive. And so this press system is going to be a little bit smaller, but it gives you a lot of experience in different tools. So my idea is to really be able to teach people that want to get involved with hydraulic forming, give them a really good overview, and start to really ingrain those skills, that knowledge of like how metal moves and how it works.
Yeah.
And so for a much lower price, then you can learn shot plates, you can learn silhouette dies, non-conforming dies. We've got like a really cool crushed bracelet. I haven't shown you yet, but that's a fun technique. Roller printing, embossing. So just really like being able to get the full breadth of
just a taste of each little flavor.
A taste of a lot of things. And then from there, that gives you the knowledge to be like, okay, cool, I really like this. Like we were like playing around with silhouette dies, and you're like, okay, like you lit up, and you're like, all right, cool. There's like a lot you can do with that.
I really did.
And so before people just go and like invest a bunch of money in tooling that they're not going to use, this starter system, and there's also going to be an educational component that comes with it.
Yeah.
So that you actually get like handouts and you get to learn about it. Safety, ergonomic setup. I mean, there's so much to it to really getting it really dialed in to make it super, super useful. I'm excited about the starter system. It's going to be a good, easy way to get into the technique.
That's really what people are going to be curious about, is like, how do you bring this rather large, not massive, but rather larger piece of equipment into my studio space and put it to work, basically, and have it help you work. And so I'm the manual press is where I'm starting. And so having that, people often think there's this big intimidation of like, do I need the electrical one? You and I had the conversation that you can do everything on the manual that you can also do on the electric. You don't have to upgrade to the electric.
Yeah.
Some people actually prefer the manual, but if you want a greater level of speed, that's when the electric would be beneficial. Yeah, and you can,
say you're like working out of a garage studio and you're making a few pieces every weekend and selling them, like, the manual's great. And, maybe from there you start getting into like more one-of-a-kind pieces. That manual's still going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Like there's not, or if you're doing like one-of-a-kind type pieces, more high-end, there's not much of a reason to get an electric except for just like saving your energy and time. If you go the direction I went, which was more production jewelry,
right?
Small runs, but I do 20 or 40 bracelets in a batch.
Yeah.
Which was fun. It's a little tedious, but like, when with the electric press, all of a sudden I could do a bracelet every 2 minutes or so, even less. I think I would try to race myself and see like how many I could do, and I think my record was like 38 bracelets in an hour, so which was kind of crazy. Those were like 18 gauge titanium bracelets.
Yeah.
But yeah, or you got a product that just really hits and like little stud earrings, like then okay, cool. The electric is going to save you hours each week for that.
Well, I just want to demystify the barrier to entry for people who would like to consider using a press,
Yeah.
because it is fairly straightforward equipment, and it allows you to do a lot. So once you get that unit, once you purchase that press, you and I were talking about it. There's a huge world that opens up to any sort of maker.
Endless world, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
like a
Yeah.
lifetime's worth
Yeah,
once you
absolutely.
just get the press.
Um, yeah, and I think it's the like with our basic classic press. The classic press is awesome. It's not like we're not selling just a hobby like throwaway press.
No, it's a professional
It's a professional grade
machine.
press. It has the right working envelope, the right size, the ergonomics. All of that stuff is like inherent in the design, so that it's
Mhm.
like that's going to last you the rest of your life. Uh, and it's $12.98 for
Yeah,
that press right now.
yeah.
And then from there, like 20 years down the road, you can upgrade it to electric. 10 years down the road, whatever. Like our system is kind of designed to do that. And then the tooling, yeah, you can pick and choose like whatever you really like doing: bracelets, rings, hollowware, vessels. And my focus has shifted over the years, and I've been having always die making has been really fun, coining dies specifically. But been playing around with vessels more, which is something that
Yeah.
like I've done, I learned, I know all the techniques really well, right? But it I wasn't like super inspired, and now all of a sudden been working, got some like cool new designs, and playing with that. So the press is still, yeah, really easy. Like I've got the system now, I can like just keep going.
So that's something I want to clarify to listeners, because this is what I wanted clarification on myself, is that the manual press and the electrical upgrade are not two separate presses. They're not completely different from each other, as in they work together. So you can purchase the manual and then upgrade it to an electrical at a later time. So you can
Yeah.
see how much you use the press. You can see if the added element of the electric speed is worth it to you.
Mm-hmm.
But you only have to purchase the initial press to kind of then have that gauge, and then the electric is an add-on. It's not, the manual press is one price and the electric press is
Yeah.
another. If you purchase the electric press, you still get the same system as the
Yeah.
manual, but
Yeah.
then it just has
It's all,
the
I guess,
system.
modular is
Yeah.
kind of like the
Yes.
term. It's all a modular system. It all works together flawlessly.
And I think that that's so cool, because then it can grow with you. I think it's very
Mm-hmm.
rare that we see tools that can grow with an artist and develop with an artist.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a technique where, yeah, you might like change techniques, or you might get more complicated, or I mean, there's just like all these different avenues and pathways. And yeah, I worked with some people who start carving in acrylic and then start carving in brass for making non-conforming dies. And then I've had a few people come out here to be like, all right, cool, like now let's take a file and a saw to tool steel, and let's start like making tool steel dies. And that stuff's super fun. It's really cool.
I've been walking around your shop noticing that you have used a label maker to put names on your machines. Why?
I don't know why or where it started. Part of it is like communication around the shop, and
Yeah.
like people would be like, oh yeah, like like I say, oh, you want to go use this press, and it's like, well, what press? Like we have an arbor press, we have a special shot plate press, and so like instead of saying just like go use the press, it's like, oh, okay, there's Big Bird, and Big Bird's our deep draw press,
My favorite was the bench shear. That was Ed Sheeran.
And Sharon, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't. I didn't come up with that name, but that was a great pun.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the hydraulic press. I also wanted to have you talk about the pattern plates, and then also a little bit about custom tooling. I know you touched on it, but I want you to go a little bit deeper in it. When someone has an idea or a problem, how do they approach you? How do they collaborate with you? How do they create a tool that's exclusive to them, and you help them do that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's so many different realms like pathways we can follow, tools we can create. the more info, the better for me. If somebody's wanting to reach out and it's like, okay, well, what gauge metal are you making? What's your ideal shape, size? And, I know it's a lot to like, because people don't always know what the options are, but like the more sort of like upfront info I can help. And I mean, just like some of the simplest things is like if you can draw in like a nice black pen on a piece of white paper, I can take that and make an exact pattern plate for you. And so we're playing with some new technologies for making pattern plates, new steels and stuff like that. So some of these, we're getting super fine detail, hardened steel pattern plates that aren't going to damage your rolling mill. And yeah, it's kind of, it's really cool. And a lot of the stuff we offer as custom, because it doesn't make sense to sort of like mass produce some of these really technical pieces. But yeah, if you come to me with just a black and white drawing, like that's a great place to start. We can also like, depending, so Phil and I in 2017 wrote a whole paper. It's like all the different ways to get to making dies, whether that's you making them or someone else making them. There's a lot of companies out there, but it's part of it starts as like, where is your strength? Mm-hmm. So if you're a really amazing wax carver, should you suddenly start carving in steel? Like maybe, but you can also carve in wax, send that here or somewhere else and get it 3D scanned. And now we can take that 3D scan of that wax model and make a really amazing die out of that. And then start die striking, whether it's hollow forms or coins or whatever.
Really servicing the creativity of jewelers in various walks of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would be super cool if someone took a white piece of paper and just like honestly signed their signature or did a sketch of some kind in the black ink that you said and sent it over to you, and then they can put that on their pieces, which is wild.
Whether it's, I mean, it's just like I've used it recently just for like the backs of bezels. A little like floral pattern, and all of a sudden that's just like, that cranked up the like value of that piece. Just instead of just like flat brushed silver, it's this like cool floral pattern on the back. So and that's like, if you can draw, awesome. I kind of suck at drawing. I still manage to get stuff on paper and then refine it, and then I take it to CAD and I further refine the drawing because I can sit there and like, I know what I want it to look like, but there's a way to get there through everything. But drawings are awesome, and that's a good place to start with custom tooling. And then, I mean, we had like some tooling I was starting to develop for forming these little tiny like tubular flowers. And there's a company that makes tons of them every year. And they just sent me the finished piece. They're like, I need this. And so I was like, okay, cool. I like, kind of worked out a whole system for cutting them, forming them, bending them, and then, they can solder them and be done. So
I want to reiterate the biggest misconception about Bonny Doon.
Yeah.
That you're like some large company.
Some large company.
A lot of people, when I first heard of you guys, I was like, oh, they're like some big corporation.
Yeah.
And then I get here and it's like you and like a few people helping
I love
me
it.
out.
People call me up and they're like, I'll answer, be like, hello, this is Peter, Bonny Doon. And they're like, oh, Peter, like, you the owner? And it's like, well, yeah, like, that's who you're going to call and talk to. Usually me. So, we're a small company. And I think we were talking earlier, but like, there's an agility to staying small. So it's not like, I don't know, it's always, corporations get a bad rap a lot of times because they're just like so big and they can't do things as, quickly and easily. And so, it's really a beauty to stay in small batches of tools, and making stuff right here, I think is amazing. And part of it for me is like a kid, like still like a kid being like, oh, cool, I have this idea, I can go make it.
Yeah.
And for developing tooling, that's huge because I'm not sending drawings off to China, waiting months for them to come back and then being like, this doesn't work, So it's like when I'm working on prototyping and developing, I go to I make something, it's really crappy. I go to the press and I'm like, oh, okay, this kind of works. And then I can come back and do another. So there's like, that's part of like staying small and agile is like that element. And then every generation of tool, like every time we make tools, our philosophy is here is like 1% better every day. And so it's like bracelet formers have gotten subtly better every single time we've made them. And that's I don't know. I take a lot of pride in that. I think most jewelers like would, say like want to say that about their work as well, right? Yeah, and that's, anyways, I think it's important, and it also like ideally, hopefully people find a lot of value in the tools beyond just like the surface appearance of like, oh, that's a tool. Like everybody makes different tools. And it's like,
Right.
well, we're hoping all those little fine details, like they make a difference for some people.
Well, and I think one of the greatest skills that you can hone in and develop as a young bench jeweler or just jeweler in general is to modify your own tools. I bought a bench grinder recently to be able to modify some pliers and tweezers
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. But there is a limit there where, like, I don't have all of this machinery. And
Yeah.
so that would be the case where, okay, I can imagine something like you and I were talking about earlier. We'll see if this comes to fruition, is a custom mandrel. Like there's a particular shape that I want for my work. I can't make a mandrel.
Yeah.
But I can come to you and we can collaborate and do that together.
I mean, if we had more time today, I'd fire up the mill and we could like start prototyping them. But yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think it's important to, I mean, hammers are classic.
Yeah.
Like the first thing that people should not just take for granted, they're hammers. There's a lot that goes into it, and being able to shape and recondition hammers, stuff like that. Or files is a big one too. And that was something I didn't do for a while until I realized like that safety edge isn't actually that good. And so I was like, actually went and started like cleaning up and like smoothing and polishing that safety edge. So, without.
Can you talk about what that is? Because I don't think everyone knows that. I know that was something that GIA taught very adamantly in their jewelers program.
Okay, yeah.
But there are some other jewelers programs that don't teach that. Can you really quickly just talk about
what
that
is?
is?
And so like not all files have a safety edge, but a lot of them do, with one of the narrow edges without any teeth on it. But the teeth that are on the other faces usually kind of stick out a little bit. So if you're trying to get in and file really nice and cleanly into something, you end up cutting into that surface. And usually I'll use, like, if I want to do a really good job, I'll get like diamond sanding sticks, and do it by hand so that I keep it nice and square.
Right.
And just kind of like ease those edges just a little bit so that those edges aren't cutting into what I'm surfing against. But I know there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
I'll go to my lapidary and use like the diamond wheels on there, or just a big Scotch-Brite deburring wheel.
You can get diamond sanding sticks or diamond laps on Amazon for like less than $40.
I mean, nice. One of the things, using the little silicone abrasive wheels, and I get the cheap little diamond knife sharpeners so that I can shape those wheels to fit into whatever weird nook and cranny of like the piece of jewelry I'm working on. So and you don't have to go buy like specialty shaped wheels for that. You can just shape them to fit exactly. And I think like working on the press, it's important to sit down and cut a silhouette die out of acrylic. Like you can go laser them. You can have people, like there's all these other technologies, but like
sawing it out with just a traditional bench saw yourself,
is really important. And that's kind of this. It's good to do that, and it's good to make mistakes, and then it's good to be like, oh, okay, cool, that shape didn't really work. I'm going to try a different shape, or I'm going to like use the urethane in different ways. When you can get into like just silhouette dies, there's all these different ways you can manipulate your final form by using urethane in different ways.
Right.
And there's some shapes that just don't work well for silhouette dies and need something different.
Yeah.
So there's like the pros and cons for everything. But I guess, it's like starting with modifying that hammer, like just leads to a lifetime of like making dies, making stuff work for you in every way.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. We got a little nerdy there. Let's go. We got into it. I love it. What advice would you give to a brand new jeweler just starting out?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, and I think this is like, I'm not very good at drawing, but with I think it's one of the most critical skills to draw on paper with pencils, or I like micron pens for whatever. I like that feel.
Yeah.
My drawings suck. I think and with like hand engraving, it's the one skill that's holding me back from really achieving the designs I want, is having the ability to really draw well. So I think it'd be like, I used to do every morning, I'd just do quick little 5-10 minute sketches, and that was huge. And I think that's a really, I would say that would be number one thing, would be like draw a lot, because it's going to help you bring your dreams to life. And then the other thing I would say is get a good pair of calipers and start learning precision. Because then all of a sudden, like, hinges aren't a big deal. Like little clasps, ring sizing, all of that stuff with a good set of calipers becomes really easy. And I've seen a lot of people really struggle with like really precision ring sizing.
Yeah.
and it's like, well, yeah, just got to learn that precision. And now they're got hair back here. They're digital. We don't use fractions. Like it's, the math should be pretty easy, hopefully.
Can people come visit you here in the shop in
Yeah,
Taos,
if
New
you wanna
Mexico?
make the trek to Taos, we always welcome people. It's a beautiful place here.
Yeah.
Summers aren't that hot. Winters are cold and snowy if you want to ski. But yeah, we always welcome people to the shop. It's it's a nice big shop, but it's not huge, and we've got all of the tools to play with. And yeah, if you do come visit, make sure you like put some time aside.
Yeah.
Because we'll geek out and show you all sorts of stuff. So
yeah,
it's a fun place.
How can people connect with you, talk to you, learn from you? Because you do workshops, you do teach.
I do workshops. Yeah, we don't do too many. Just traveling with all the equipment and doing that stuff is difficult. So I've put a lot of my focus into creating YouTube videos. I think I hope people really like utilize that because it's like 15 years of teaching classes, and I've developed all of the point by point how I teach stuff. I'm really concentrating on teaching always process over procedure. So like I want to teach the ideas behind the tooling, behind how metal moves, because with that knowledge, then you can start making your own tools. You can start modifying stuff. You can also just really understand, like, I want to make this design. This is how I need to get there.
Yeah.
So anyways, my YouTube videos are dry and kind of nerdy, but like I think there's a lot of good stuff there. Teach classes on occasion, and some people do come here to do training as well. And that's how I've been trying to like learn and further my skill set, is just going and doing one-on-one or small group classes. And it's tough and it's expensive, but like, yeah, if you really want to dive into die making in like 2 days in this shop, it's like kind of insane how much we can produce, how much like
you can
knowledge
cover
you
a lot.
can get. Yeah.
I just really want to encourage, especially, I think you see a lot of this big machinery, and for a young woman like myself, I think it's intimidating because you and I grew up differently.
Yeah.
Like you grew up in a shop.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't grow up necessarily with people around me who were even handy, let alone like I had a few. I had my stepdad who's an engineer, but like otherwise that was the limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And so even as you and I were talking today, I realized, oh, I don't know this terminology.
Yeah.
So just being here is really great. But if someone is like me who has a limited terminology and understanding, I still feel like you have made it incredibly accessible to surpass the barrier to entry to access, especially the hydraulic press. It's like the tool that I think is really, really applicable to so many different types of jewelers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really think so. I mean, I think that's like why I decided to like buy the business and start running it, and is like how amazing the press was for me. And like I showed up to my very first craft show. I went ACC Baltimore. Was absolutely terrified, and I don't know. I mean, I think my work's not for everybody, but like, yeah, having the press already in my tool house kind of set me apart in some ways, just because I was able to do stuff that most people weren't doing.
Yeah.
And part of it for me was just working with weird materials.
Yeah, just people having access. I think me seeing how the press was relatively easy to set up, I think that's another intimidation factor, is like, am I going to be able to, I think the press itself is relatively heavy, like what, 60 pounds?
Yeah, I mean, the whole
like
thing
that?
all put together is almost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
So you have the ram, and then the frame itself is 60 pounds.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're...
So it's a 2-person setup.
Yeah.
For sure.
For sure.
But...
I mean, I know lots of, smaller statured people who've done it by themselves, and that's really awesome.
Yeah.
I think I would struggle to set it up entirely by myself.
But just being able to see it was awesome. We recorded it. You can go to my Instagram to see that, because I just think that it was super simple, and just breaking it down really dissolved that any sort of intimidation or fear factor that I would have. It does now feel super like I can approach it, and I'm not intimidated by it or scared by it, which I think is the stance that I take with most machinery, if I'm honest.
I mean, yeah, machinery is amazing and difficult, and at the same time, I think the hydraulic presses are a very simple machinery, also very complex in what they can do. My intro video on YouTube goes over like how to use the press and safety. Yeah. And I feel fairly confident in that, like, if you go through the safety, the 5 C's, and you follow that, and when you get our tools and instructions, you read the instructions. Crazy concept, but I do try to put a lot of work into those, so they're good. Like if you follow those, it's actually a very safe, very attainable process.
And you were saying that you write all the manuals.
Yeah.
And they're super detailed.
They're super detailed. It's a lot of work. Just a few of us here doing that. But yeah, we just updated all the bracelet forming instructions, and it's like a small book. And it goes into bracelet sizing. It goes into like all the weird little tips and tricks for if you're working with 1/4 inch thick stock, how do you get the size right? Because it's a little trickier, you know? So all of that stuff. So there's a lot in there. I've been throwing in little fun nuggets of like how to work with thin gold, with coining dies or shot plates.
Yeah.
So there's little funny nuggets in there. It's like, okay, cool. There's some like weird techniques where you can add thin gold to something like a coining die and get really cool designs.
Where can people purchase Bonny Doon Tools?
Yeah, so we don't distribute. And part of that, I actually want to address that real quick because people always want to buy direct. And like, I feel strongly that like, I want to do what I'm best at, and that's designing and making tools.
Yeah.
And jewelry. And so we do work with distributors. So Rio Grande is going to be the place to buy all of the tools, and then hammers and vices and stakes. And we've even got cool forming stakes that fit with the Swanstrom anvil. You can get that stuff at Rio Grande or at microtools.com.
Yeah.
And yeah, by working with these distributors, it allows us to do more of what we're good at here.
Alleviates just a different. It's distributing tools is it's whole other world. And
we're also 3 hours from like the nearest airport, and like our freight trucks don't show up most of the days they say they're going to. So we're in rural New Mexico, so shipping from here is not the easiest thing. So working with distributors helps us out there. A lot.
Yeah. And isn't Rio here?
Yeah, Rio's in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
So
okay. That works.
South of us, it's easy to ship to them. But yeah, so that's anyways where you find the tools. I do some tech support for people. So if you're having issues, it's usually me answering the phone as well. So we're still here and involved and like here to help people out. We just don't sell the tools direct in that capacity. Unless you're looking for custom tooling, and then it's easiest to go with like talk to me, and I'll do free 30-minute consultation and see what it is you need. Because sometimes those projects are going to turn into like, big multi-month like design and engineering projects. So.
Something that I've been enjoying lately that you've been doing, and I hope you keep doing it because they're so fun, is the Instagram lives. So Bonny Doon Tools on Instagram is a great resource for anyone who owns your tooling, because you also jump on live a couple times a month and do demos. And that has been so fun.
I think there's like so many fun, nerdy things we can do at the press. So that's just my idea, is to jump on there and be like, hey, let's show off some of these, these crazy things. We like demoed some of the first dies that Phil Poirier made. I demoed that last time. So we'll be doing that more.
I'm so excited to, I think just expanding my knowledge on the press at large and everything that you guys offer, and all your machining is so specific and jeweler centric. I think you being a jeweler is so key to the success of this company, and how you have addressed the needs that you have and then been able to apply it on a larger scale. I just think is such a gift, and I'm grateful that you're here in this space.
I'm glad you came down. And I mean, like, our philosophy is like every single tool that I make, I use, and I wouldn't sell if it wasn't useful. I'm really excited to see what you do with it. It's going to be really exciting.
I am too. I'm not sure yet.
Because, everybody does such crazy different stuff. So it'll be super fun.
I just feel like I've seen so much today that now I need to digest it all and see how it's going to apply. But it absolutely will. Like, I don't think that there will be a week that goes by that I don't use the press at least 3 times. Just because it's going to become such an instrumental part of everything that I do. Because, again, I feel like it really is like a limb when you have it. It's like, no, seriously, because I don't have a ton of strength. I don't have a lot of like a good gusto, I guess. So the press bridges that gap. And so I'm really excited for that. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, for for
It's
sure.
been awesome.
It's fun to have you here.
Any last tips for listeners? Anything you wanna make sure that they walk away with?
One of the other things I always point out too is like every piece of jewelry I make usually gets formed on the press one way or another. My favorite former are the anti-clastic bracelet formers. So like all my pendants and earrings get this cool little like anti-clastic little Pringle shape to it. So like little subtle things like that I think can really like take a flat piece of silver and elevate it into something new. So that's where like thinking about tools in interesting ways. I think that's something that's well worth playing around with, experimenting with.
Special conceptualization. You were such a good interview. You are. You did so good.
Okay, good.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pass the Torch, Legacies and Jewelry. Peter Gilroy here from Bonny Doon Tools. Thank you again for having me in Taos, New Mexico. And we will see you guys on the next episode. Send us any questions or comments, and we will get to them as soon as we can.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. I'm very impressed.
Everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pass the Torch, Legacies in Jewelry. My name is Naja DeSavandiste, and thank you, Peter Gilroy, for having me out at Bonny Doon Tools in Taos, New Mexico. It was the best pit stop on my way to Santa Fe. It was such an incredible day. I had the time of my life exploring and just geeking out in that tool shop. Peter is just so knowledgeable. He is quite the engineer, and I just really respect him and everything that he's doing to try to help jewelers around the world. So if you're interested in his tooling, it is available on microtools.com. It's also available on riogrande.com if you have an account with them. I think that the starter kit that he offers is the best bang for your buck, especially if you're just wanting to get into hydraulic press work and see if it is for you. All the bells and whistles can come later, but the starter kit is really the bare bones of what you need to literally get started. And it's actually quite comprehensive and really comes with so many components that are so useful. And the manual press, I've been using it now for a couple weeks. I love it. I genuinely just cannot even fathom not having it in my shop. So if you are especially just a independent maker and it's 1 to 7 people in a shop, I just think a press belongs in every single shop that's of that that's the manual and doing production to the level of customs and forming and one of a kinds and stuff like that. I cannot say enough good things about it. So again, thank you, Peter, for having me. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you are going to be at JCK, I will also be at JCK. So I'll probably post updates on where I am and what I'm up to. But if you would like to come up and say hi, I will try to have a goodie bag ready for you. So have a great rest of your week. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode.